Welcome to the Contracting Officer Podcast. It's not just for contracting officers. If you're anywhere in the government acquisition world, this podcast is for you. Today, we're talking how the different types of appropriations that Congress makes affect you. And this episode is brought to you by Skyway Acquisition. Check out skywayacq.com for more. With that, let's get started. Colors of money. Why colors of money?
Turns out they're not actually tied to military colors. Like it's green money if it's Army money, or blue money if it's Navy or Air Force.
Yeah, that would be too easy.
Yeah, that'd be logical. We can't do that. It's actually types of money, but that's not nearly as catchy. So that's where the phrase "colors of money" comes from.
In reality, colors of money are types of appropriations.
And what's it? I think it's in the Constitution. It says, no public money shall be withdrawn from the Treasury without appropriation by Congress, right? So Congress says, we're going to appropriate this money, and you can spend this much money on this thing or things within this time period. And so that's what again, colors of money equals types of appropriations. I have no idea how it got so colloquial, but that's really what we're talking about, is Congress's control of the purse strings. It'd be so much easier if they just appropriated all the money in one lump sum, but what's the fun in that? Right? I mean, and we're going to talk through why it exists this way. This is the system we have. So managing within it is a critical skill in GovCon.
All right, before we start managing the colors of money, let's stop and say thanks.
Thanks this week goes to Paul Wiggins for liking and sharing our J&A episode of the podcast. So Paul is a contract specialist at the Army Corps of Engineers. He's in the Huntsville, Alabama area. And I want to thank Paul for sharing our episodes on LinkedIn, because the likes and shares on LinkedIn are one of the best ways for people to find out about our podcast.
Thanks, Paul. We appreciate it. Back to colors of money. Give us a baseline first, Kevin.
This comes from the bona fide need rule, which we've mentioned in a couple of episodes. But basically, that's where I was saying before, where Congress says you get this much money to spend on this thing within this time frame. And so the language behind the bona fide need rule deals with purpose, time, and amount. Purpose is Congress appropriated the money to buy a thing. That's the purpose. What do they give it to the agency or the department for? The time is you only have this fiscal year to use it. You only have 3 years to use it, et cetera. They'll limit how long you have to use the money, because you said when you asked for it that I need it for this thing during this window. And then the amount, the third element of bona fide is it the right amount? They gave you $5 million. That's all you got.
You
don't get to round up. Yeah, you can't spend $5 million in one. You can spend $5 million total. So purpose, time, and amount. That's the baseline of the bona fide need rule, which drives a lot of this colors of money stuff.
Yeah, the government, you can't spend money you don't have outside of the time that they've given you to spend it. And if you don't spend the money that they've given you, as in obligating it on a contract, well, it goes back to the Treasury. And we have a whole different episode where we dive into all of the stages of money. You'll hear words like, is the money committed? Is it obligated, expended, canceled? We're not going to get into that here. We got into it in episode 262, which is called Stages of Money. When Congress appropriates money, it's either an annual appropriation or a multi-year appropriation. And that's really the crux of what a color of money is. Different types of money expire at different times based on whether it's given to you every year or whether it's given to you with multiple years to spend it. And I probably twisted that all around.
For example, 1 year money, that's as an annual appropriation. And that's for things that are consumable. It's operations and maintenance. It's pay for people. You get the benefit of that money in the year that you obligate, that you spend it.
And so at this point, if you're listening to this podcast, you're thinking, okay, you said colors of money. It's 1 year money. What color is 1 year money? And the answer is we don't actually use color words to describe the money. 1 year money, like every other kind of money, it has a code that is used to describe it. It's the code in the financial systems, and it's different for every agency and department, which makes it easy to track if you're at the top level of the U.S. Treasury, right? But in DoD alone, 1 year money can be 3600 if you're in the Air Force. It's 2040 2040 if you're in the Army, or 3019 if you're in the Navy. That's just 3 departments within the Department of Defense. So at no point will they say the Army money is the green money. When someone says, what color money is it? Oh, it's 2040, which makes no sense at all.
That's not actually a color, that's a number. What the 2040 tells you is it's Army money and it's good for 1 year. So you've met part of the bona fide need, because now you know it's good for 1 year, and depending on if you have the right amount of it and you're buying the right thing with it, you're good to go. And these codes, by the way, are all listed in what's called the Accounting Classification Reference Number, or an ACRN. We did a whole episode about that. That was episode 254. And so, like you said, Paul, this allows the Treasury to track where all the money goes. And so that ACRN is like, I don't know, 30 digits or something. It's got all kinds of stuff in it. This is one of the things that's in there.
Yeah, so don't get wrapped up in what's the gold money, what's the blue money, what's the pink money. It's never spoken of like that, even though it's called colors of money. The color is the type. So 1 year money, like you said, O&M, consumables, operations. You get the benefit now. There's also 2 year money for research and development. I believe what they're thinking here is it takes a little longer to get research and development funds on contract. So if you only had 1 year to get it on contract, it might be more difficult to obligate it all and therefore get it spent.
And it might be harder to define your requirement and get the acquisition actually awarded. If you're really buying something that is a true research element, by the time you agree on what exactly is going to happen on this contract, you don't want to be hammed in by, we have to get something on contract by September 30th, even though we don't exactly know what it is. That's a train wreck in the making.
3 year money is procurement funds. And this can take even longer to define requirements and get it on contract. You're actually buying systems here after you've developed them. There's also 5 year money for construction projects, which must take even longer. I've never done construction, but it must take even longer to get all of that sorted out and get it on contract than it does for research and development.
Well, and for large, this is for military construction, for example. This is a large project. They take years to develop. They take years to actually get off the ground. The likelihood of you being able to obligate all of the money to build a large building in a year, I mean, a lot of custom homes can't be built in a year, let alone like a military facility. So yeah, it takes a while.
So again, when we're talking colors of money, we're talking about what it's for and how long it's good for. So for operations and maintenance, you get 1 year. For research and development, 2 years. Procurement, 3 years. Construction, 5 years. Clear as mud. I got it. Why is this important to understand, even though it is complicated?
If we don't have money, right? Without money, there's no contract. So the buyer can't buy anything, and again, there's no sale. So the seller can't sell anything. So we need to understand: do we have money? Okay, there's that amount piece we talked about.
But
but is it the right kind of money? For example, you have $1 million and you want to buy some large vehicle, right? You're probably going to get more than one year of use out of that vehicle. Well, if that $1 million is O&M or 3,600 money in the Air Force, you probably can't use it to buy a system, because that's what the procurement money is for. So one thing is that we have the right amount of money. We actually have money to buy something, but then there's this issue of, is it the right kind of money?
Think about if you had to deal with this in your personal life. You wanted to build a house, so construction of the house itself is one color of money. That's your construction money. But to furnish it, you may need procurement money or operations money to get it furnished. Maintenance in the future, if you want to get the grass mowed, if you want to fix the plumbing, fix a leak, that's operations and maintenance money. What if you decide, hey, should I go solar with this? After you've had the house, after it's built, you decide, should I go solar, put some solar panels on the roof? Well, that might be research and development money to find out if that's even an option. What if you had to spend, what if you had to budget this way and then actually spend according to the budget this way, rather than just, I have a bank account, can I afford solar panels?
Yeah, and this gets really Maddening is the right term, because you're right. You got to budget accordingly. And what you could do, depending on the circumstances, is the government could actually, if they do all of this at once, it could be part of one large project and it could be all lumped in under one type of money. Maybe, but it's not often how it happens. So you get into this issue of, is this a long-term fix we're making, or is this maintenance? And so all these decisions are driving the interpretation of what kind of money we have and then whether or not we could use it. And that's, as a customer who just wants their stuff, it's maddening, because they're thinking, I just want my stuff. What do you mean you can't use this kind of money? And it's a bizarre conversation to have. And as the contracting officer, you're the one who's in the way.
Or you have to use the money in this account now or we'll take it back. So now you have to decide, oh, geez, I have to buy this. I don't need to buy this right now, but I have this money that I'm not going to be able to spend. So I guess I will put a deck on the house now, because I have to work in the deck on the house in every fifth podcast or so, I think.
When you describe it that way, it's even more hilarious. It's like, put a deck on, even though I haven't actually built the back of the house yet, but sure.
What this means is, if the buyers and sellers, the government and industry, don't have context on what type of money they have available for what and when, they could be talking right past each other. Since I just mentioned when, we'll stop here and talk acquisition time zones and execution time zones. Colors of money is really a zoneless concept. From the very beginning of defining a requirement, you have to start thinking about budgeting for that requirement and what kind of money will we need.
And then during the market research zone, you're seeing, can we actually use this type of money? Does industry going to deliver this in a way that matches that type of money?
Yeah. So you're starting to figure out what type of acquisition strategy we're going to use here and put together a solicitation. During the RFP zone and the selection zone, this is where you're making sure you have the right amount of the right type of money at the right time to actually award a contract.
That's when things like, we need to get this source selection done by September 30th because we only have money that's good until then.
Right.
Yes, that becomes a conversation during the selection zone.
Then you award a contract and you move over to the execution side. During the honeymoon and the performance zone, you have to ensure that you're spending the money that needs to be spent during the right time and not spending too much because they might not have more money until next year. And during the recompete and wrap-up zone, there are cases where the government has to juggle money around between contracts in order to pay the right bills with the right color of money at the right time.
And of course, when you're wrapping up the overall contract, did you use all the different types of money you had? And is there some left that needs to be expended on the contract?
Or expended on another contract, right? When you're closing out contracts, if there's dollars left that were unexpended, those dollars will go away back to the Treasury unless you're able to de-obligate them and re-obligate them to another contract that can use that same kind of money. It gets really complicated right at the end. All right, let's focus on government-specific kind of concepts here. Why does the government care about colors of money?
We talked about the three deciders in episode 118. And the three deciders and the time zones, they're kind of the basis of a lot of the training that we do. And so we'll talk through them in context here. So the three deciders are the economic decider, it's the one that has the money. Customer, it's the one that has the need, and then the contracting officer. They're the three people that are involved, three groups of people who are involved in awarding contracts. So how much each decider cares about this colors of money issue kind of manifests in different ways. The economic decider cares that the money gets used, because that's the one that's the person they went through all the trouble to get Congress to give it to them in the first place. Like, okay, we've got all this money. We need to get this actually obligated on contract before it expires.
Yeah, and it's weird. There's different incentives than in industry, where sometimes spending less money can be a good thing. In the government, there's generally an incentive to spend all of the dollars in your budget. If you don't spend them all, then next year you won't get that much budget. On the industry side, that can happen. Sure, right? You have to justify a large budget next year by spending all your money, but spending less money actually can lead to more profitability. So it's not exactly the same as the way the government might think about spending their money.
On the industry side, you have what's generally perceived as a profit motive. And on the government side, you've got what I'll think of as an obligation motive. You want to get this money obligated, right? The second decider, the customer, that's the one that actually has the need. How do they care about colors of money? Well, they want their stuff, right? So they're not as concerned about whether or not the money goes back to Congress. They're more concerned about, was it used to buy my stuff? And if they find out that it expired before it bought their stuff, that's
Right.
concerned about.
Right. If they get everything they expected and it works right, and some of the money isn't obligated and spent and goes back to the Treasury, they might not even know that happened. And if they did, they might not care as long as they got what they needed.
As long as they got what they needed. And so the lesson here is if they find out that by giving the evaluation criteria results to the contracting officer on October 2nd is going to result in them not getting anything, they need to find that out before
Right.
October 2nd. They need to know what the impact is.
What about from the contracting officer's perspective?
And the contracting officer is the third decider. And they're looking closely at this. As a contracting officer, this is where I focus because the money's not all green, right? It needs to match. The bona fide need rule is the contracting officer's responsibility. We talked about the time, the purpose, and the amount. Otherwise, they're violating what's called the Anti-Deficiency Act.
Yeah, from the contracting officer's perspective, sometimes it's not so much about the big picture of the entire agency's budget, and it's not so much making sure all the money is spent to meet the agency's needs in the right way and how much is going to go back. The contracting officer is often more micro-focused. Do I have the right money for the contract that I'm about to sign right now? Yes, it matches. Okay, sign it. On to the next contract to sign, right? It's much more focused. And as you get higher up in the contracting officer world, in the contracts profession, you may get more involved in those big picture conversations and situations. But for the most part, contracting officers are right now on this contract or on this RFP, this acquisition. Do I have the right money for this right now?
We've talked about this before, that the contracting officer doesn't have the requirement. They don't have the money. The contracting officer has a responsibility to put those two things together. So take the money from the economic decider and buy the things that the customer wants. Well, their role in this exercise here with the colors of money is make sure it's correct. So you're right. It's like, I'm not zooming out saying this is only 42% of our O&M budget for I don't care. It's like, it's just going to solve my customer's problem. And did the economic decider give me money I can use? Yes. Okay, let's move forward. Otherwise, the contracting officer would be violating the Anti-Deficiency Act. The Anti-Deficiency Act is legislation enacted by Congress, and because it's designed to prevent, it's not designed, it does, prevents the incurring of obligations or the making of expenditures in excess of the amounts available in appropriations. In other words, don't spend money Congress didn't give you. This law was initially enacted, get this, in 1884. It was a while ago, and then it was updated in 1950 and 1982.
So at some point back in 1884, or shortly before 1884, some agency or department tried to spend money that was appropriated for them in a way that Congress didn't intend. So they created a rule that said, you can't spend more than we give you for this time period and for what we gave it to you for.
The ADA, the Anti-Deficiency Act violation, is probably the biggest thing you think of as a contracting officer when you're signing that contract.
You get that beat into you.
When I make sure. Yes, they teach you a lot about not screwing that one up.
This colors of money thing causes all kinds of business gymnastics for the government to track the years and the colors and ensure everything gets spent on the right thing before it expires. And it can be a juggling act when money's getting close to expiration, when you can't obligate it on contracts anymore. Because money can only be obligated, put on a contract for a certain time period. But after it's on a contract, it can be expended even if it's past the end of the time period. There can be a real rush to obligate money, or a series of crazy obligation and de-obligations actions to get expiring money obligated in places where they can be spent right at the end of the fiscal year. As you're heading up to the end of the fiscal year, that's when you get into the scenario that we call fallout money. There's money that is going to fall out of the sky on you because if they don't get it on a contract, it's not going to be able to be spent. It's going to go back to the Treasury. And that leads us right to why industry should care.
Money's not all green until it's obligated. After industry gets it, it's all green, unless they allocate it differently.
Yeah, from industry's perspective, you have to be aware of what color of money the government would, should, and could use to buy from you. Once it's on your contract, you don't really care about what kind it is anymore. It's money you can spend. The reason industry gets wrapped up in this is that end of the fiscal year. This is, government fiscal year ends on September 30th. Next one begins on October 1st. It's not calendar year like most of us think about it. So at the end of the fiscal year, as you're getting into September, some money is expiring. Even if it's multi-year appropriations, if it's 3-year money at the end of the third year, it's expiring.
There's always fallout money. We did an episode,
Right.
Episode 307 was about that. And that's the idea of the rush to get something on contract.
So industry folks, be ready to receive that money that falls out when funds are about to expire. Smart targeters, smart companies pre-educate their customers on what to do with that fallout money. And that's, well, give it to me. Educate your customer that, hey, we have an existing contract or an easy contractual path that will allow you to spend money on something you need before it expires. Upfront, hey, if you have $50,000 in fallout money, we're an 8A company, so it could be a sole source award to us. Really easy for a contracting officer to award. Or we're on this GSA schedule, so simple to award. We have this IDIQ, this indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract, just sitting there waiting for that money to fall on it. If they don't understand that, during the chaos that can occur as all the programs lobby for their share of fallout money, the programs that have a clear need and can explain that need have a better chance of getting that money. So if you can help your customers understand, I can get you what you need, and here's how quickly, and this is how you know that it can be obligated before the end of the fiscal year, you're more likely to get it than a company that has not educated their customer in that way.
It's the idea of being the path of least resistance, is to get this money obligated. Here is a path. And like you said, you got to educate your customer on that. Well, what's driving the need for all that education is the colors of money. Because there's so many rules about what money can be used at what time, et cetera. To your point, they have $50,000 at its fallout money. You should know what kind of money that is, and you should know that they can put it on this contract vehicle. If you have a services contract vehicle and it's procurement funds, they can't use it for that. So you have to have thought of something they can use $50,000 in procurement money to buy, which is why people who understand how to use these colors of money are very effective.
One step ahead. Yeah. Industry should also recognize that there is an administrative cost that gets laid upon you because of expiring money. The government sometimes does random funding modifications to take money off of your contract and put it on another contract because they need that particular color of money.
They seem random to the contractor. They're not actually random from the government side. They're not random,
right?
But because they're dumped on you, they seem random.
From the government side, it's we need this money because it can be spent right now on this other contract, and I don't have any other money to do that, and I can give you next year's money to replace it. When that happens, from the industry perspective, it's the cost of doing business with the government, right? Suck it up. If you help them process those type of modifications as quickly as possible, you can get kind of a feather in your cap as being an easy contractor to deal with that makes it easier for you to get awards in the future. All right, Kevin, let's try to keep this one easy and wrap it up.
On the government side, don't assume your industry counterparts know this stuff.
Right.
It's not intuitive. If you and I are building a house, we don't think in terms of colors of money to buy different parts of it.
Just the
and
term.
On top of that, it's
just the term.
Yeah, exactly.
What color of money is it? It's 3,600. Wait, that's not a color.
Yeah, this concept can be very opaque to people. On top of that, you want to be clear about the expectations and the impact of the expiring funds at the end of the year. As a contracting officer, educate your government customer, because they may not know this stuff. They generally do, but it's the case they don't. But likewise, educate your counterparts on what's going to happen at the end of the fiscal year, what you're going to be spending your time doing during the month of September. They should be ready to reply to mods that do seem random to them, because you're like, why are you asking to move $50,000 off this contract? Because it's expiring. I have to use it.
Industry folks, know what type of money your customer uses for what and what kind of money they have available. And when it comes to fallout money, remember that being able to receive the money to get it on a contract before it expires is the goal. Make it easy for your government counterparts to understand how to give it to you.
To meet their mission.
Yeah, to meet their mission, right. All right, I'll talk to you later.
I'll see you, Paul.
Okay, that's it for another episode of the Contracting Officer Podcast. When you need help understanding how the colors of money impact you or how to take advantage of fallout money, remember that Skyway's team of former contracting officers is here to help you with custom consulting and training. Give us a call at 877-884-5280 or check out skywayacq.com. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.